Welcome to The Leaders Who Care, a podcast powered by Dynamis Group. We are here to give the stage and support to those committed to create a positive and lasting impact, way beyond the profits and margins, the leaders of the world who care for others and serve a bigger purpose. Join us on the journey of creating a better, more caring world. And now to your host, Marian Tamalkov.
Happy Wednesday, dear audience. This is the last podcast of the year, and as you know, we're on a mission to bring together some of the most caring leaders from every corner of the world to share their experiences, their practices, just give stage to them. And today I have the privilege to welcome somebody I have known for many years and a leader who lead by example, extraordinary in creating great teams that perform, but also somebody who is humble and has humility to really share some of the great success he's achieved throughout his career. And today he's actually leading and leader of Supplier Quality and Development Director at VELUX, really a champion of sustainability in the supply chain. And I have the privilege to welcome David Collins. Dave, thank you for coming on board today.
That's okay. My pleasure to be here. It's quite interesting to catch up again. So I enjoy the opportunity to have a discussion. I think every time we have a discussion, we end up cleansing the world of problems. So.
Well, both minds are really focused on how can we serve and make a difference. And it's always a joy when we have that connection and discussion. So it's an honor to have you today, and would love to really talk about some of the important things and experiences about personally yourself, Dave. And you have 40 years experience in manufacturing and engineering. I mean, that's first of all, just starting with your story, how did you end up in that? How did you fall into that area, and what keeps you motivated doing it?
Oh man. Well, first of all, I mean, when I was at school, I always knew I was going to be an architect, so that worked out well. So I went to college, left college, went into working for the local government, actually, on installing machines and all the dirty, oily things that happen. And after that, I got into MOD, Ministry of Defence subcontractors, and kind of worked like that for about 8 years, and that was quite interesting. Bit of travel and some quite weird and wonderful experiences. But I think after leaving there and spending a bit of time in retail, I realized that engineering was really where I wanted to be. So I kind of drifted into the automotive industry via diamond tooling, strangely enough, where I spent about 20 years. And I think dealing with a lot of OEMs in the automotive industry and a little bit of aerospace taught me a lot about where the focus is on a global stage, and it opened up a whole load of horizons for me. And I think more recently I've been working for VELUX, so I think that's 7 years next month. So time flies. It took me in a completely different direction. It's not the same as my experiences in the automotive industry. Completely different industry, completely different culture, and it gave me an opportunity to grow as well. So completely outside of my comfort zone.
Well, I know you really been very passionate about a number of innovations related to looking at the whole supply chain and sustainability. I know some things, it's really a passion for yours. Europe is, and especially in a new year in 2023, there'll be a lot of regulations and to measure the carbon footprint. There's a lot of organizations that need to take an urgent action. Tell us more about that. What's coming? Is the future brighter and better, do you think, from a supply chain and sustainability point of view, or is it still we're at the very beginning to see that deployed?
I think it really depends on how you view sustainability. Now, a lot of people talk carbon footprint and use sustainability in the same context. And a lot of people I come across talk about sustainability when they really mean carbon footprint. So sustainability is a really big subject. So a sustainable supply chain and a sustainable value chain covers a whole host of topics. I mean, if you just look at the UN Sustainable Development Goals, there's 17 of them. Climate impact is number 13, and then carbon footprint is one subcategory of that. So, it's not just carbon footprint. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that are equally as important, and some of them have legal implications. And I think from that point of view, they tend to get overlooked because the hot topic is carbon footprint. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that is as critical to sustainability as a big picture as carbon footprint that I think sometimes takes a bit of a backseat. So I think that's where regulation, directives and things are catching up. And I think that's what's coming over the next few years, is a more general focus on things like sanctions and embargoes came to the fore this year because of all the trouble that's been going on in Europe. So that has raised up as another hot topic, whereas it was somewhat suppressed and below the headlines, I think, before February this year. The same with things like modern slavery and a whole host of human rights activities that sometimes don't get the spotlight they deserve. So I think that's where regulation is catching up. And from what I see, I think because it's not been in the spotlight, there's a lot of companies that are not necessarily on the front foot with what's coming. So a lot of these things that are coming up, like the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive and things like that, they're all going to be building on things that companies should already have, that are active, that are embedded, that are ingrained in organizations. And I think there's a lot of instances where they're not necessarily as ingrained and embedded as they should be. And I think from that aspect, there's a lot of companies that are going to be catching up now because there's a lot more focus on it. So I think there's catch up to do, plus there's putting the new regulations and directives on top of it. Well, so I think it's going to be a busy time the next 5 years.
That is what I feel as well. And there's a lot of, if there's a catch up to do, that means there's a lot of work to be done. And that also will mean financial implications immediately, pretty much in the coming months, if things do not take action. If a leader is a business unit leader or CEO is looking at the organization and they're not necessarily that deep in the sustainability, really critical pillars, so to say, what would be your advice to them? What should be the focus for the coming year, at least for 2023? What are the foundational pillars that needs to be really deeply looked at and invested in?
I think the most critical thing is people. Sorry, the lights have just gone down a bit there. People. There's a lot of organizations I see, both in supply chain and the customer side of the business and generally peers as well, where it comes in, things like the CRSD is coming in. And
CRSD is, just to clarify, what is it?
Sorry, it's the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive.
Okay.
It's other people see it as the mandatory due diligence. There's a lot of things coming in on the value chain, and it's basically, do you do what you say you do, and does your value chain do what they say they do? So, for example, if you have people that sign the code of conduct, that's just people do it like the same as license agreements when you buy some software. Read through pages and pages and pages, click the button and move on. And I think the same happens with things like code of conduct, basic working conditions, all sorts of documents like that corporates go through and sign off on. I'm not necessarily convinced that in a lot of cases people take a good hard look at what it is they're committing to. And then it comes as a bit of a surprise. So what I would, getting back to your question really, is have some dedicated people. Too many times this is given to people as an extra thing to do. So you've got like the quality, environment, health and safety, the HR group, all sorts of other people, finance, in organizations that are involved in a lot of this stuff. And it's, you need to do this as well, you need to do this as well, you need to do this. What I see is missing in a lot of cases is a dedicated function to coordinate it and facilitate it. They don't have to do everything, but you need some focus, and you need some people who actually understand the big picture to bring all of those elements within the organization together. So I suppose what I'm saying is get that focus, get that dedicated resource. You don't have to have an army of people, but just a couple of people that actually understand this big umbrella picture and can knit together all of the good things that you're probably already doing and pull it together as a strategy and a focus of the policy. And that's where I see companies missing a trick, because they've got lots of silos doing lots of individual parts of these aspects without pulling it together and making it a corporate or a global or even just a company-wide strategy, policy, focus. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. No, thank you for sharing. And that is really important to have these dedicated resources. The question here is, of course, so that's the basic. What about if you want to advance more? So what are the the question here is a carbon footprint. A lot of organizations are committing to net zero. What does net zero actually mean? And it's how do you actually get to net zero or even neutral, or more than net zero? You go like contributing. So I'm just curious of how this is all going to work out for an organization that is just starting to measure those things. So starting with dedication, couple of resources, but really there's a lot of work to be done to reach a goal of net zero.
Yeah, and I mean, again, we get back to the carbon footprint thing, which is obviously the flavor of the month. But again, it involves a lot of things that are already in place. So, for example, if you're running ERP systems, if you're running software that looks after all your stock and all your ordering and your invoicing and things like that, all that needs to be brought together. So it's about using what you've already got. Don't necessarily go out there and reinvent the wheel. I think if you take some steps back and you look at what do the regulations or what do the directives require that you report and how you can measure it, but more importantly, how can you demonstrate to yourself that you're making a difference? And most companies will find they've already got some of the building blocks in place. And it's, again, coming back to pulling it together again. So understanding what you do and the impact you do as an organization is key first, but then understanding the upstream and downstream aspects of it. So, you can look at your own organization as a standard process model. You have an input, which is your supply chain. The process is what you do, add value. And then you've got your customers that you pass on to downstream. So understanding it as a basic, simple process with inputs, process, outputs is that 30,000 foot view that you've got to start with. And you need to understand your processes first. Understand the impact you're having. Then look at the levers that drive that impact. And then look at the impact you have on downstream society. And it's understanding what you've got is the first critical thing. But as I say, there's so many things that companies already have, but they're not pulling together all of those aspects and strengths that are already embedded in the organization.
What about when you depend on other suppliers? So how would you know that the suppliers, what do they have to prove in order to meet the EU regulations, especially the international suppliers? And sometimes they use a lot of energy, or their carbon footprint is quite high. How do you check that? How do you prevent and really still help your suppliers as well? Because that's part of the process. You cannot be responsible for your suppliers, but you need to still choose what they.
Yes and no, to be honest, because the suppliers give you what you ask for and what you buy. So you do have a direct impact on your supplier's carbon footprint because of what you purchase.
Yeah.
So there's three things that really affect your carbon footprint. There's the embedded carbon in the material or whatever it is that you're actually buying. There's the economy in which it's produced, so your tier ones. And then there's how far you move it around the planet. And I think if you can break it down into those three critical aspects and then start to address those and understand those contributing factors, that's when you start to understand the model that you have in your supply chain. So, for example, a lot of manufacturing companies, 80-90% of their carbon footprint will be in the supply chain and downstream. 10%, 15% is the scope 1 and 2, the stuff that you actually do. And I'm talking about a sort of standard manufacturing, assembly and design company. But a big chunk of that carbon footprint is in your supply chain. And that is driven by, again, the same sort of ratios in a lot of cases. So if you look at things like glass industry, for example, a large part of the carbon footprint is actually in making the glass, turning the sand and silica and all the other ingredients into a piece of glass that you look through. So there's a lot of activity that goes on at that tier 1 and a small amount in their supply chain. But again, they're producing what you ask for. So you do have a direct impact on the carbon footprint of your supply chain. And that's how much of it you buy, how thick the material is, how thin the material is, what type of material you're buying, what alloy you're buying. So there's things that you can do to work with the supply chain to then have an impact on the carbon footprint and reduce it. And also where you're sourcing from.
Absolutely. Just coming back to leadership here, Dave, I know you've been knowing you for many years. I've seen that you had a great ability to attract and retain exceptionally gifted talent that's often very different and diverse. And you bring them together to work really very consistently, coherently, which sounds simple to have a great team, but there's a lot of work that goes behind it. Some people do it naturally, others don't. How do you attract and retain exceptionally gifted talent? What is your really way of leading and accomplishing that? Because I know you have done it multiple times, so it's not a balloon success. It's not just one-off. I know you do it consistently. What are the ingredients, if you look back and maybe dissect that, just to help the audience and say, hey, what is just a life example of, with more than 40 years, that really you've done a lot of those great successes with people, and you've done some tremendous accomplishments in the past, but I know that you had to work with a lot of people to do so. And part of that was, first of all, to bring it together. And I know when you started, even in VELUX, you had to build a team and so forth. So, and historically, you've been doing that consistently. So how do you do it?
I think the first thing to remember is that if you've got 100 people working with you, you're actually dealing with 101 personalities. I think a lot of leaders forget that they are a personality as well, with strengths, weaknesses, faults, failings. And I'm exactly the same. I'm human. Sometimes I annoy people. Sometimes I make people happy. And I think at the end of the day, it's about bringing a whole bunch of different personalities together and getting them to enjoy what they do. I've always believed that a manager's first responsibility is to be the servant of their team. So my job, my primary goal is to enable my team to do their jobs, because that way we're successful.
Yeah.
So I need to support the team. I need to make sure that they have the infrastructure, the equipment, but also the atmosphere and the surroundings and the coherence to work together, because you are going to bring together a whole bunch of different personalities. And some people have got a great ability to deliver and a great value to bring to a team, but sometimes they'll also bring baggage as well. So not everybody is a round peg in a round hole, but it's also about putting together the skill set that you need to deliver what the business objectives are. But people have got to enjoy it while they're doing it. The day you wake up and you think, really don't want to go to work, that's the time to start thinking, are you doing the right thing? So I think really it's about creating an atmosphere, creating a team spirit where people feel part of the team, and having a common objective, having clear goals, but also knowing that they can rely on each other. It's like when you look at football managers, the successful football managers, you know, not everybody's an attacker or a defender or a midfielder or a goalkeeper. And some people are multitask, and some people are really good at one aspect and they're not particularly good at others. I mean, I'm terrible at putting PowerPoints together. I mean, you give me a flip chart and I can teach, demonstrate anything you like, but give me a PowerPoint and it's just full of words. So I need somebody that can translate what I'm saying into a communication format that other people can relate to. So I can present PowerPoints. I'm really not very good at putting them together. So I think that's what it is, you know.
So first of all, understanding, obviously, the leader, they need to understand that themselves very well, and just really with both the strengths and weaknesses. That's very important. Serve their team. Obviously, it's equally important here, and to enable them to unblock, to do their job, their role, so they can excel, and create that culture of reliability, relying on each other and trusting on each other, and above, and all this combined with the joy of doing that. And that happens with clear, often with the team personalities, values, and the clear objectives and mission that you're looking to accomplish. It sounds so simple. So the question is, why so many leaders may be struggling with that, and is what care does this play into this process?
I think the first thing you've got to understand is you don't have to be the most important person in the room to be a leader.
Okay.
You know, you don't have to be the smartest guy in the room. You don't have to be the one that's always right. So that's critically important to understand that, you know, you're going to make mistakes, and owning that is important as well. So understanding that you are as much a part of the team as leading a team is important. And you need to contribute, you need to add value to the team, not just to the business.
Yeah.
And I think some people forget that. I mean, you know, if you've got things that need to be addressed, then you need to address them. If you understand a little bit more about how people react and try and understand how people will accept either criticism or praise, then I think that's important as well. So never forget that people are there to earn money to a large degree. That's a big reason why people work. So, you know, what's important to you may not be the most important thing to them. So translating your objectives, your goals, your agenda, and your ambitions that you need to deliver for the wider organization into something that people can relate to and get on board with and feel part of, I think is a really important part of that, rather than just issuing a load of instructions and micromanaging people. You know, I employ people to do a job. I give them some clear goals and objectives, and I don't necessarily tell them all the time how to do it. I think it's important that people find their own way of delivering their own objectives and their own goals. And sometimes you need to be a bit more flexible sometimes. But at the end of the day, if you're delivering what overall an organization and a business and society in general needs, then I think, yeah, you can be a bit more flexible. So, yes, be flexible.
Yeah, and that is really essential here of learning and understanding how people work, and the human cravings and the psychology of people. You mentioned that for you comes naturally a lot of those things. So what about if they don't come naturally to the leader? What do you do to become, or you want to become a caring leader? How can you kind of, what are the behaviors, patterns that you need to aspire to in order to get there if you're not there?
I think trust people. First of all, you've got to trust your team so that they can trust you.
I see.
And I think a lot of leaders need to ask themselves, if you were fighting in the trenches and you had to stand up and lead your army towards the machine guns, would they get out of the trench and follow you? That's a critical part, because if you've got trust in your team and faith in your team, they will have trust and faith in you. And it's not a given right. You have to earn it. You can't just sit in a chair and expect people to come along for the journey. So you have to work on making people or bringing people on board and getting them to be part of the journey and realize that they are making a difference, because they are. I've had successes, I've had failures in the past. Everybody wins and loses at some point. And at the end of the day, you succeed or you don't together. Very rarely is it an individual's fault if something goes wrong. It's a system is broken, or everybody around either wasn't willing or brave enough to say, look, that's wrong, or you're doing something wrong, before it becomes a disaster. So very rarely is it an individual's fault, but we tend to blame individuals a lot. And I'm not sure that's necessarily a good thing, because sometimes it will be an individual person, but most of the time it's a system or a team that's failed rather than an individual.
And you mentioned, of course, some people finding it difficult to trust others, and I think that's really important to develop that. But also, you need to earn the trust. And you mentioned that you are earning the trust by leading by example and serving others and helping them, right? Is that, how do you, in your way, how do you earn the trust of your people?
I think you just have to be open and honest and let people see that, that you don't, again, have to be the smartest guy in the room. Ask people for their opinions, ask for advice, ask for information, admit the things that you can't do. Every individual that's in every team is not going to tick every box on the job description. They're not going to tick every box on the behavioral expectations of an HR questionnaire. And that's okay. And that's okay, because everybody's a different person. What people are in these teams for is what they can bring to the party. And everybody has got something of value to bring. And if they don't, then it's kind of your fault, because you brought them into the team. So
it's a good point. That's taking responsibility and knowing what this value is and putting it together in a system or a way that they can pull together and deliver the desired outcome, I guess, is really essential and important here. They're looking at really your personal where you are today, what you've achieved at this age of your career. What excites you? What gives you fulfillment? What are the things that are important to you?
Fixing things, in a nutshell. I think that's probably, people say to me, what motivates you? And it's two things, really. If something's broken, you need to fix it. But I think the flip side is if something is told or somebody says you can't do it, then I think that's a challenge. And I think meeting challenges and achieving things that are not easy is a good motivation. And I think that's the same for a team as well. It's not just an individual trait. I've been in situations historically where we've had some objectives and some targets that, quite honestly, people have laughed at. You're never going to do that. That's impossible. You can't do this in this industry, or whatever other reason that's thrown at you. And I think that in itself is a challenge, sitting back and thinking, you can't do it because you don't believe you can do it. Now, I can't go and run a marathon. And no matter how much I believe I could run a marathon, I couldn't physically run a marathon at the moment. But there are other things where they are possible if you pull the right things together. So if I had the time and I had the training and I had the physical attributes, yes, I could run a marathon. But that's not important to me right now. So I think it's what you've got to understand is what's going to light your fire, what gets that fire going inside of you. And sustainability in the supply chain covers such a huge topic. It's such an all-encompassing, integrated interconnectedness of so many different aspects. How can you not be interested? Someone said to me when I started looking at the scope 3 side of things and the carbon footprint, this is hugely complex. And I said, yeah, it is. It's great, isn't it? Why wouldn't you want to do it? Quite honestly, it's something that impacts the business. It impacts me. It impacts my children. It impacts my neighbours. It impacts everything that we do as a species. So how can you get more important than that?
Absolutely, and just so grateful that you're bringing those really comments here. And what is your hope, Dave, for more brighter or more caring world? What would you like to see?
I'd like people to focus more on the positive things around them than the negative. I mean, I've said for many years, every day you wake up's a good one, because one day you won't. So
that sounds so simple, but it's easy to forget when you get a lot of things in fire.
Yeah, I mean, what you do in your day is up to you. And sometimes life throws some really big rocks at you, and you've got to find a way of either getting out from underneath them or getting around them or getting over them. But don't give up. So when you look at things like the sustainability agenda, especially things like carbon footprint, there are a lot of things that we can do. There really are. There are a lot of things that society in general doesn't want to do and is outside their comfort zone. And I think there's a lot of things that are politically very difficult to do. But the ability, the resource and the potential is there. What we've got to do is harness it and pull it together and make it work. That's where we get into grandstanding, and that's where we get into egos at play, and that's where we get into the political side of things. And you can't ignore it, but it's not an agenda I enjoy very much, in the sense that everybody's really in it for what they can do and what they can get out of it rather than what they can give.
You mentioned something important. Giving gives a lot of fulfillment and makes you alive, because if you can give, then you have abundance. If not always, but if it's from your heart, it's just really makes you feel that you contribute, you make a difference. It's really it opens the door also for receiving as well when you start giving.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably one of my biggest failings is people say to me, what's it got to do with you? I mean, if you're walking down the street and you see a car on fire, I mean, do you just walk past and think, well, that's the fire brigade's job to put it out? Or, do you see if you can help? And it's the same in business. It's the same in society. It's the same in any company that you work in. If you see something that's broken, sitting back and saying, well, that's not my role, that's not my responsibility, that doesn't really help. Even if you haven't got the ability to fix it, then raising it on the agenda or pointing a big neon sign at it and saying, look, this needs fixing, it's something that everybody can do. Why wouldn't you?
Well, that is a great way not to ignore things that are around us in our business, in our community, on the street even. there's so many of those experiments. Do you intervene if somebody's fighting or if somebody's suffering? The answer is absolutely. If you can help, do that. Just go. Not everybody will or can, but hopefully more good examples will inspire others to do so. And what a great way, to kind of send that message, especially around this season of Christmas arriving. It's really a very special time for really hope and really giving people more of that to take care of each other and start taking actions of things that's are broken or not working. That's how we could make a difference and hopefully make a more better and caring world.
Yeah, I mean, I had someone even relatively recently say to me, it's sort of, yes, I know you think you're doing the right thing, but, you don't understand the complexities of it. My response is, well, help me understand them. If I don't understand, but you think I'm doing the right thing, help me to understand. Don't just then stop. Take that as a, well, okay, you think you're doing the right thing, but you don't understand, and then walk away. That kind of doesn't help, does it? That doesn't move the agenda forward. It doesn't improve things. I mean, I really got heavily into quality probably in the 90s. That's the 1990s, not the 1890s. And I think part of that was about seeing things that you could continuously improve. If you can go in home at the end of the week or at the end of the day and think one thing is better, or one thing has improved, or even if somebody's feeling better about what they're doing, that's still a tick in the good box. I know perhaps it's very simplistic, but it's all these little micro things that happen that build up to a bigger picture. And I think going forward, getting back to what you were saying earlier about companies and what needs to be done and what's coming, I think there's a lot of things that have not been on the agenda recently in the last few years. And
like what, Dave? What has not been on the agenda?
Well, there's been a lot about things like carbon footprint. There's a lot of, now we see a lot of interest in things like sanctions and embargoes. There's a whole host of requirements that businesses are supposed to do and are important for a business to champion, that if they're not in the public eye, sometimes don't get the attention they need. And you see this in society in general as well, to a certain degree. So unless it's highlighted, unless there's a spotlight shone on it, then it doesn't always get the attention. So you've got a lot of things like the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive that's coming up, and mandatory due diligence, those aspects within society now that are going to shine a spotlight on things that perhaps haven't been in the spotlight before. And I think companies may struggle a little bit sometimes because the infrastructure and the foundations for a lot of those things have not always been maintained. So then as these new regulations and these new requirements and directives come forward over the next 3 to 5 years, if those foundations aren't there, you end up not only playing catch up, but then actually trying to put the new stuff on top of it. So it becomes quite a big thing. So I think don't lose focus going forward on all the other aspects because they're not in the spotlight. And sometimes you raise some of these things. Now I've experienced myself in previous histories. You bring something up on the agenda and it's not what is in the public eye at the moment, or it's not seen as important at the moment, but it's still a requirement. It's still a legal thing. It's still a directive. And people are saying, why are you talking about this? Why is it important now? Well, it's always been important. It's always been there. It's just that we haven't been looking at it. So it's not suddenly a new thing because you've raised it on the agenda. It's just that nobody's really focused on it. And now it becomes a problem. So getting back to right at the top of our conversation, I think if you've got people in the organization that focus on all of these things, then they don't fall off the agenda. They don't go by the wayside. And then when they do get back into the spotlight, you're not playing catch up all the time. And that's a hard thing for businesses to do, because how do you demonstrate that that's adding value? How can you say that's affecting the bottom line? And it's a bit like insurance, really, to a large extent. It's you pay your monthly insurance premiums and you hope you never need it. But when you do need it, it's there. And it's the same with a lot of these activities in the background. And so the sustainability agenda is full of a lot of things that are not always in the spotlight and are seen as just administrative exercises or something that we have to do. And yeah, we've got to put a policy on the web page, and we have to do this, and we do a statement once a year. And, it becomes not important because nobody's catching you out on it. No one's pulling you up on it. No one's saying you haven't done it. And if it's not monitored, if it's not policed, then it tends to... It's a bit like, not paying your taxes. If you get away with not paying your taxes for 10 years and then suddenly you get caught, the defense isn't, well, I haven't been paying it for 10 years. Why are you chasing me now? It's, I've been lucky. And I think even some big corporations suffer from that.
Well, this is a very, very nice example what you give in, and it's important to build all the muscles and important pillars of the organization in order to function. It's not just the sustainability and the carbon footprint, it's everything else that you need to pay attention as much as possible. It's not easy, though, to balance all those things when you grow a business, when you transform a business.
No,
but it's essential, and as you said, there will be a moment. If you have a good time in the business, pay attention to those. The good times are the ones that you need to really use to fix things and not be blind that everything is working. I think that is not easy, especially in these days of crisis and transformation. If anyone from business leaders or the community wants to reach out to you, Dave, what's the best way to connect with you? Maybe share some best practices or share some exchange some ideas.
Well, I can put an email address in the LinkedIn profile. So when we drop from here, I'll put my personal email in there. So if anybody just wants to have a chat or get bored or look at some bad PowerPoints, then I'm more than happy to share.
I'm sure there's a lot of value in those, but and you have a professional team that covered this blind spot. But thank you for being modest and offering support. Any final words, Dave, for the audience today? It's been really, thank you for sharing all those insights. Anything that you want to highlight?
I would say, if you're a leader out there, if you're running a company, if you've got a large department that's working for you, listen to people put their hands up who say there's a problem. If people are saying, we're not addressing this, we're not looking at this, this is something that we need to look at, listen. And then you can make a business decision of consciously not to do it. That's fine. Sometimes you will get away with it, sometimes you'll suffer from it, but at the end of the day, you've made a conscious business decision to do something or not do something. And I think that's the important thing, is understand the rules of the game you're playing. Because if you don't understand the rules, you're going to find it very hard to win. So that's what I'd say, really. It's just...
Thank you, Dave. And this is the last episode of the year. It was a pleasure and honor to have you. And I want to take the opportunity and wish everyone a really wonderful time over Christmas, to renew the spirits, to have a really reconnect. And Christmas is very special. For me personally, it's life, it's the birth of Jesus, and thank God for that opportunity. And the blessings go out to the whole audience and their families and the world. So thank you, Dave, and blessings goes to you and your family.
Season's greetings to everybody. Take care, have a break, and if while you're on holiday somebody asks you where you work and you have to think about it, you're having a good time.
Excellent. Thank you, Dave.
All right. Thank you.